All right, section 8.2 notes. In section 8.1 we talked about adding and subtracting polynomials. And in 8.2 we're really going to be talking about multiplying and factoring, which is dividing polynomials. So on this page we have an example, example number 1, which says simplify 3x times the quantity 2x squared plus 4x minus 1. And when we see simplify this expression, it means to distribute the 3x through all three terms. And that operation that we are doing is multiplying. So we are going to multiply 3x times 2x squared to get 6x cubed, 3x times 4x to get 12x squared, and 3x minus times negative 1 to get negative 3x. So when asked to simplify an expression like this, what they are saying is distribute the value or the term or the factor out in front of the parentheses through whatever is being added and subtracted in the parentheses. So the opposite of this would be to when you are asked to factor. So factor implies the operation of division. So we are going to divide. And what we want to do is divide out the greatest common factor of all the terms. So we need to find the greatest common factor first. And the easiest way to find the greatest common factor would be to factor each of the terms out to their prime factorization. So you want to factor 6x cubed out until it's all primes, and we'll start with factoring 6. 6 is, its factors are 3 and 2, both of which are prime. So we have 2 times 3. And x cubed we just factor out, write out as its factors, x times x times x. 12x squared, well, 12 is 3 times 4. 3 is prime. 4 we can factor further to be 2 times 2. And you then would multiply by the x times x. So we're not done factoring until the numbers that are listed in our factors are all prime factors, meaning they have their own factors are itself and 1. So then on the negative 3x, we want to factor that one. My suggestion is to always factor out the negative 1 first, and then factor out the number that negative 1 is being multiplied by, so in this case 3. So we have negative 1 times 3 times x. Now what we want to do is look at the three terms and find which factors they have in common. So as you can see, the dog is barking. Sorry about that. That was Hobbs. He was barking. All right, so we want to look to see what factors each of the terms have in common. And as you can see, I've circled 3 and x appear in both lists of prime factors. So that means that our greatest common factor over the three terms would be 3 times x, or 3x. Once we have found the greatest common factor, then we can actually divide each term by that factor and write our expression in factored form. So our initial expression that we started with this time was 6x cubed plus 12x squared minus 3x. Excuse me. And we need to divide each one of those terms by 3x. 6x cubed divided by 3x, well, 6 divided by 3 is 2. And x cubed over x is x squared. 12x squared divided by 3x will give us 4x. And negative 3x divided by 3x would give us negative 1. So to write it in factored form, we take the greatest common factor that we're dividing by, 3x, that goes out in front of the parentheses, and inside the parentheses is what we get when we divide by that value. So that's where we have our 2x squared plus 4x minus 1. So let's look at one more example. Here, example 2, we start with 5d cubed minus 10d squared plus 20d. This was directly off one of your homework problems, and you're asked to factor this expression. So we look for the greatest common factor. So I have factored 5d cubed as 5 times 1. I didn't write the times 1 because 1 is always a factor. Oh, my dog might bark again. Okay. times d times d times d. I factored negative 10d squared to be negative 1 times 5 times 2 times d times d. And then positive 20d to be 5 times 2 times 2 times d. Notice that 4, I did 5 times 4, and 4 is not prime, so I had to factor further to get 2 times 2. Now I'll circle the common factors, and I have 5d in each one of my terms, so my greatest common factor is 5d. So to get this in factored form, I need to divide each term by 5d. And that means the 5d will be written in front of the parentheses, and what I'm left with inside, well, let's figure out what that will be. 5d cubed divided by 5d, the 5 over 5 is 1. D cubed over d is d squared, so that's what we have here. Minus 10d squared over 5d, 10 divided by 5 is 2. D squared over d is d, so we get minus 2d because the sign in front of the 10 was negative. Then we have plus 20d divided by 5d. Well, 20 divided by 5 is 4, and d divided by d is 1. So we have 4 times 1, or just 4. Now, if you are ever asked to check your answer, or it's just a good idea for you to check your answer, all we need to do is multiply or simplify this factored form just like we did in the first example. So we want to distribute 5d through d squared minus 2d plus 4. And when we do that, we get 5d cubed minus 10d squared plus 20d, which is exactly what we started with in this problem. And it shows that we have factored correctly. And I put a check mark saying, yes, indeed, it does match. So that's our notes for simplifying and factoring, so multiplying and factoring polynomials. And the factoring type that we are doing here is factoring the greatest common factor.